what you want to do is you want to enter into a conversation so that you come out wiser than you went in. The best example of this is when you're having an argument with your intimate partner, let's say. Because you're going to want to win. So then you got to think, okay, well, wait a second. We've got to sort out what winning means here. So let's say that you're more verbally fluent than your partner and more treacherous. So you can win. That doesn't mean you're right, first of all. Winning when you're wrong is a really bad idea. Because then you think you're right, and you're not. And then maybe the person can see things you can't, but can't verbalize them quite as well. Well, you might want to listen. There's the possibility that they're trying to tell you how not to run headlong into a brick wall. There's some possibility of that. And so maybe you even have to help them form it. It's like, okay, I don't get exactly what you're saying. I don't get exactly why you're annoyed. I'm not sure exactly what you want me to do to change it. Let's get this clear. And then I'm going to think about it. Like, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I'm going to see if possibly you're right. I'm not going to roll over, because I would rather you weren't right. I'm not going to change.
Oh, thank you.
But I am going to listen. I would rather not run headlong into a brick wall if I don't have to. And so that's the idea with the conversation.
All right, welcome everybody. We are at a later time, which hopefully is a little bit more convenient for everybody. I hope you enjoyed your spring day today. Oh, Sean's here. Yeah, Kevin Edwards. Okay, Kevin Edwards is just stopping by to say hi. So we say hi to him and we thank him for doing so. So I'm sorry you can't stay for the whole thing. Maybe, catch it on the replay, something like that. So, but awesome you're here anyway. And then we got Survival in the house. And we got Shaman. So good to have you here. Oh, where's the I missed Shaman things. There he is. So anyway, I feel much better this week. Thank you, everybody. The cold is gone. And the hives should be gone. I went and I got my shot today. So I didn't have any bad reaction to the shot, which is wonderful. And hopefully it will take care of the hives. I did have to take some antihistamines this evening, but I don't think the shot, starts working that quickly. So, oh, right on. That's awesome. Your wife is coming to watch tonight. That's fantastic. Hey, we got Christy here. Wow. Haven't seen you in a while, girl. So, all right. So we are on Rule 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something that you don't. Which, I mean, if you think about it, everybody knows things that we don't. I mean, I'm not exactly the same as you. You're not exactly the same as me. So there's, you're going to have knowledge that I don't have. And maybe it's important knowledge. As we learned from the song, maybe it's something that'll keep us from running headlong into a brick wall. I'm glad you think that's good news, Survival. That's awesome. Yeah. It slowly but surely I am piecing myself back together. So, oh, thank you, Kevin. Look much better too. Nice and vibrant color in your face. It's good to hear. Thank you. I appreciate it. So, and then soon I'm going to start physical therapy, get me back into shape instead of being. I mean, round is a shape, but it's a shape that I'd rather not be. So, but yeah. Slowly but surely, clawing my way back to health, as it were. So it's exciting. But yeah. So we're on page 233. And does anybody want to join to read? Does anybody have the book that's in the audience? I'm not seeing any faces of people that I know have the book. I know that Logic has the book, and I know that Mantis has the book. So, hey, good evening to you too, Shaman. It's good to see you. So, yeah, if anybody has the book, raise your hand, let me know. And I would love anybody to help read along. But if not, no worries, So, survival. I don't have the book. Kevin Edwards says, mine is at home. No problem. No problem. So, yeah, we are glad Christy made it. Very, very glad Christy made it. So, okay, let's start this up. Not advice. Psychotherapy is not advice. Advice is what you get when the person you're talking with about something horrible and complicated wishes you would just shut up and go away. That's kind. Advice is what you get when the person you are talking to wants to revel in the superiority of his or her own intellect. If you weren't so stupid after all, you wouldn't have your stupid problems. Psychotherapy is a genuine conversation. Genuine conversation is exploration, articulation, and strategizing. When you're involved in a genuine conversation, you're listening and talking, but mostly listening. Listening is paying attention. It's amazing what people will tell you if you listen. Sometimes if you listen to people, they will even tell you what's wrong with them. Sometimes they will even tell you how they plan to fix it. Sometimes that helps you fix something wrong with yourself. One surprising time, and this is only one occasion of many such things when such things happened. I was listening to someone very carefully, and she told me within minutes, A, that she was a witch, and B, that her witch coven spent a lot of its time visualizing world peace together. She was a long-time lower-level functionary in some bureaucratic job. I would never have guessed that she was a witch. I also didn't know that witch covens spent any of their time visualizing world peace. I didn't know what to make of any of it either, but it wasn't boring, and that's something. In my clinical practice, I talk and I listen. I talk more to some people and listen more to others. Many of the people I listen to have no one else to talk to. Some of them are truly alone in the world. There are far more people like that than you think. You don't meet them because they are alone. Others are surrounded by tyrants or narcissists or drunks or traumatized people or professional victims. Some are not good at articulating themselves. They go off on tangents. They repeat themselves. They say vague and contradictory things. They're hard to listen to. Others have terrible things happening around them. They have parents with Alzheimer's or sick children. There's not much time left over for their personal concerns. One time, a client who I had been seeing for a few months came into my office for her scheduled appointment, and after some brief preliminaries, she announced, "I think I was raped." He has a footnote here. Here again, I have disguised many of the details of this case to maintain the privacy of those involved while attempting to maintain the central meaning of the events. It is not easy to know how to respond to a statement like that, although there is frequently some mystery around such events. Often alcohol is involved, as it is in most sexual assaults. Alcohol can cause ambiguity. That's partly why people drink. Alcohol temporarily lifts the terrible burden of self-consciousness from people. Drunk people know about the future, but they don't care about it. That's exciting. That's exhilarating. Drunk people can party like there's no tomorrow. But because there is a tomorrow, most of the time, drunk people also get into trouble. They black out. They go to dangerous places with careless people. They have fun, but they also get raped. So I immediately thought something like that might be involved. How else to understand, I think? But that wasn't the end of the story. The first sentence, she added the detail 5 times. 5 times. The first sentence was awful enough, but the second produced something unfathomable. 5 times? What could that possibly mean? Survival says listening to people can be hard sometimes. I find myself getting irritated listening to drunk people. Yes. Usually only drunk people can talk to drunk people. And I've noticed that it can be very difficult. You need a lot of patience. So my client told me that she would go to a bar and have a few drinks. Someone would start to talk to her. She would end up at his place or her place with him. The evening would proceed inevitably to its sexual climax. The next day she would wake up uncertain about what happened, uncertain about her motives, uncertain about his motives, and uncertain about the world. Miss S, we'll call her, was vague to the point of non-existence. She was a ghost of a person. She dressed, however, like a professional. She knew how to present herself for first appearances. In consequence, she had finagled her way onto a government advisory board considering the construction of a major piece of transportation infrastructure, even though she knew nothing about government advising or construction. She also hosted a local public access radio show dedicated to small businesses, even though she had never had a real job and knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. She had been receiving welfare payments for the entirety of her adulthood. Her parents had never provided her with a minute of attention. She had 4 brothers, and they were not at all good to her. She had no friends now and none in the past. She had no partner. She had no one to talk to, and she didn't know how to think on her own. That's not rare. She had no self. She was, instead, a walking cacophony of unintegrated experiences. I had tried previously to help her find a job. I asked her if she had a CV. She said yes. I asked her to bring it in to me. She brought it into our next session. It was 50 pages long. It was in a file folder box divided into sections with the manila tag separations, the ones with the little colorful index markers on the sides. The sections included such topics as my dreams and books I have read. She had written down dozens of her nighttime dreams in the my dreams section and provided brief summaries and reviews of her reading material. This was what she proposed to send to prospective employers, or perhaps already had, who really knew. It was impossible to understand how much someone has to be no one at all to exist in a world where a file folder box containing 50 pages indexed listing dreams and novels constitutes a CV. Miss S knew nothing about herself. She knew nothing about other individuals. She knew nothing about the world. She was a movie played out of focus, and she was desperately waiting for a story about herself to make it all make sense. If you add some sugar to cold water, stir it, the sugar will dissolve. If you heat up that water, you can dissolve more. If you heat the water to boiling, you can add a lot more sugar and get it to dissolve too. Then, if you take that boiling sugar water and slowly cool it and don't bump it or jar it, you can trick it, I don't know how else to phrase this, into holding a lot more dissolved sugar than it would have if it had remained cold all along. That's called a supersaturated solution. If you drop a single crystal of sugar into the supersaturated solution, all the excess sugar will suddenly and dramatically crystallize. It's as if it's crying out for order. That was my client. People like her are the reason that many forms of psychotherapy currently practiced all work. People can be so confused that their psyches will be ordered and their lives improved by the adoption of any reasonably ordered system of interpretation. This is bringing together of the disparate elements of their lives into a disciplined manner, any disciplined manner. So if you have come apart at the seams, or if you have never been together at all, you can restructure your life on Freudian, Jungian, Alderian, Rogerian, or behavioral principles. At least then you make sense. At least then you're coherent. At least then you might be good for something, if not good yet for everything. You can't fix a car with an axe, but you can cut down a tree. That's still something. At about the same time I was seeing this client, the media was all afire with stories of recovered memories, particularly of sexual assault. The dispute raged apace. Were these genuine accounts of past trauma, or were they post hoc constructs dreamed up as a consequence of pressure wittingly or unwittingly applied by incautious therapists, grasped onto desperately by clinical clients all too eager to find a simple cause for all their trouble? Sometimes it was the former, perhaps, and sometimes the latter. I understood much more clearly and precisely, however, how easy it might be to instill a false memory into the mental landscape as soon as my client revealed her uncertainty about her sexual experiences. The past appears fixed, but it's not in an important psychological sense. There is an awful lot to the past, after all the way we and the way we organize it can be subject to drastic revision. This is very true. People say that you can't change the past. You can. You can absolutely change the past by changing your perspective on the past and how you relate to the past. And suddenly it transforms into something else. Lawrence is here. Hey, Lawrence. Yeah, oh, you're exactly right, Kevin Edwards. It's that, like those reusable heat pads, and yeah, super saturated. You can do it with you can do it with salt as well. Anything that dissolves into water, you can make it super saturated by changing the temperature. So, Survival says it's got to be hard to know which part of a person's psyche is out of order and how to bring it back. Yes, very, very true. I wouldn't know the first thing about it. But I do know, like, one of my childhood experiences, I always related to it in a very, very negative way. And it was about my parents fighting, and they had woken me up in the middle of the night fighting, and all the lights were off except in their room. And I got out of bed and I went down the hall and I confronted them and I said, "Stop fighting. Mommies and daddies are not supposed to fight." And it was something that had always broken my heart, and I felt so sad about it. And my counselor her mouth just fell open and she went, "Oh my gosh, how brave." I had never considered that it was a brave thing to do. And suddenly the entirety of my past changed. My relationship to that event changed because I had been brave and I didn't even see it. And it took somebody else, talking to somebody else and having them say it, for me to be able to see it. And in that moment, the past changed. I could, sit up a little bit higher in my chair because, there I was, a child confronting yelling adults, walking down a dark hallway, to these loud and angry noises. Yeah, it was brave. And so, that made all the difference for me. And I'm starting to well up right now, just remembering it, that how drastic it changed the past. And so, yeah, so that definitely can happen. I've experienced it with several. I mean, that's basically what trauma recovery is. If you do that kind of therapy, is changing your relationship to the past. Hey, Justice is here. How you doing? Are you back from your trip and everything like that? Back home safe and sound? I hope you were able to get that broadcast going. So, yeah, it's nice. We've got a little text group going that anybody can lift their hand up when they need it and ask for help. I think that's really cool. So, yeah. Take a little bit of tobacco here. All right. Imagine, for example, a movie where nothing but terrible things happen, but in the end, everything works out. Everything is resolved. A sufficiently happy ending can change the meaning of all the previous events. Yes. They can all be viewed as worthwhile given that ending. Now imagine another movie. A lot of things are happening. They're all exciting and interesting, but there are a lot of them. 90 minutes in, you start to worry. This is a great movie, you think, but there are a lot of things going on. I sure hope the filmmaker can pull it all together. But that doesn't happen. Instead, the story ends abruptly, unresolved, or something facile and cliche occurs. You leave deeply annoyed and unsatisfied, failing to notice that you were fully engaged and enjoying the movie almost the whole time you were in the theater. The present can change the past, and the future can change the present. So, Survival says, after a big fight, my parents stood us in a line and made us choose who we were going with. My little brother picked dad. I was last. I saw my mom's eyes and I picked her. Everything worked out though. Yeah, that can happen. So, everything working out like that after terrible events. It's exactly what this paragraph is talking about. So, yeah, Shaman, I agree with this. Tough call, survival, glad it worked out. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Because, those tough moments, it's like you don't know how you're going to get through them. And the future is so uncertain. And you wonder if you make the right choice and all of that. But when it works out, it's so satisfying to the soul, It knowing that you made the right choices in the moment of that great question. That's an awesome feeling. So the present can change the past and the future can change the present. When you are remembering the past as well, you remember some parts of it and forget others. You have a clear memories of some things that happened, but not others, or potentially equal import. Just as in the present, you are aware of some aspects of your surroundings and unconscious of others. You categorize your experience, grouping some elements together and separating them from the rest. There's a mysterious arbitrariness about all of this. You don't form a comprehensive objective record. You can't. You just don't know enough. You can't perceive enough. You're not objective either. You're alive. You're subjective. You have vested interests, at least in yourself, at least usually. When what exactly should be included in the story? Where exactly is the border between events? Survival says, I was about 8. My little brother's 6 and 4. My parents never split. Oh, wow. That's awesome. My parents split after 20 years of marriage, and the last 4 years were humdingers. They were hard times to live through. Lawrence says, yes, my parents stayed together until my mother passed on. That's how it should be, Wilson's channel, welcome. Hello to everyone, and thank you. That was kind enough to help me. A week from today will decide which way my life goes. Prayers. We give you prayers, Jason. So you're not even a moderator. Well, that's because you don't show up here often enough. So I'm glad everybody was able to help you out. And we prayed for your heart surgery coming up, and Justice, we prayed for you too. If you guys ever need prayers, just let me know and I'll include them in my regular prayers that I do on Wednesdays. And it was a really good time. Really felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. And I'm just so glad that things worked out for you, Jason. So, all right. Let's see. The sexual abuse of children is distressingly common. However, it's not as common as poorly trained psychotherapists think, and it also does not always produce terribly damaged adults. This is true. I had an instance of sexual assault when I was a kid, and it actually, because of the way we resolved it, my sister and I, it actually felt extremely empowering because we made the abuse stop just by speaking up, and nothing bad happened to anybody. So, Justice says, thank you, Pam. My good friend passed away this morning. Oh, no. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's been a weird day. I bet. Oh, my goodness. Lord God, we ask that you show mercy to Justice's friend who passed this morning and to everyone that his life touched. Lord, we know that these absences can jolt us out of ourselves and out of our lives and out of the flow of things. And we just ask that you give peace to everybody involved. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Oh my goodness. That's rough. It's jolting when that happens. At least that's been my experience. So I hope that peace is on your heart, Justice. So Wilson says, thanks so much, Survival. I really mean that. Yes, I'm glad that everybody was able to come through. Latin Patriot, welcome. So, and then Jason says, condolences, Justice Catton. And Justice says, amen, thank you. You're very welcome. And Latin Patriot says, God bless you all, Justice Catton. So, yeah, we have such a wonderful group here. I just love how much you guys support each other and how much you support me and all the things, the little things that we do for one another that, you don't often find between people. I feel truly blessed knowing all of you and being able to help out with this stuff and read and spend time together and just have a good time. So, Shaman says, sending support and strength to Justice. Loss is hard. Glad you're with us tonight. Yes, me too. I'm also very glad you're with us tonight. Yeah, and Jason says, you'll see them again. Absolutely. Hallelujah. Amen. So, all right. But yeah, as I was saying, the sexual assault does not always mean negative consequences. You can come out the winner, even as the one who is victimized in the situation. So, and I've seen that with other people who, because of the way that they were able to help others who had gone through the same kind of assault, that they felt that it was worthwhile for them to have that experience because of all the good that they were able to do later on. Yes, it was horrible back then, but they were able to transform that horrible situation into such good in the world that it made all the difference for them. So, Justice says, Shaman, thank you. I've known it was going to happen. He got sick and was supposed to travel on my last road trip. Oh, well, it's a bummer that he missed out, but maybe a good thing that he missed out because if something had happened on the trip, that would have been horrible. So, y'all are bringing tears to my eyes tonight. Gotta take a quick smoke break here. All right. So, people vary in their resilience. An event that will wipe one person out can be shrugged off by another, but therapists with little secondhand knowledge of Freud often axiomatically assume that a distressed adult in their practice must have been subjected to childhood sexual abuse. Why else would they be distressed? So they dig and infer and intimate and suggest and overreact and bias and tilt. They exaggerate the importance of some instances and downplay the importance of others. They trim the facts to fit their theory, and they convince their clients that they were sexually abused, if only they could remember. And then the client starts to remember, and they start to accuse. And sometimes when they remember, what they remember never happened, and the people accused are innocent. The good news, at least the therapist's theories remained intact. That's good for the therapist. But there's no shortage of collateral damage. However, people are often willing to produce a lot of collateral damage if they can retain their theory. I knew about all of this when Miss S came to talk to me about her sexual experiences. When she recounted her trips into the singles bars and their recurring aftermath, I thought a bunch of things at once. I thought, you're so vague and so non existent. You're a denizen of chaos and the underworld. You are going to 10 different places at the same time. Anyone can take you by the hand and guide you down the road of their choosing. After all, if you're not the leading man in your own drama, you're a bit player in somebody else's, and you might as well be assigned to play a dismal, lonely, and tragic part. After Miss S recounted her story, we sat there. I thought, you have normal sexual desires. You're extremely lonely. You're unfulfilled sexually. You're afraid of men and ignorant of the world and know nothing of yourself. You wander around like an accident waiting to happen, and the accident happens, and that's your life. I thought, part of you wants to be taken. Part of you wants to be a child. You're abused by your brothers and ignored by your father, and so part of you wants revenge upon men. Part of you is guilty. Another part is ashamed. Another part is thrilled and excited. Who are you? What did you do? What happened? What was the objective truth? There was no way of knowing the objective truth, and there never would be. There was no objective observer, and there would never be. There was no complete and accurate story. Such a thing did not and could not exist. There were and are only partial accounts and fragmentary viewpoints, but some are still better than others. Memory is not a description of the objective past. Memory is a tool. Memory is the past's guide to the future. If you remember that something bad happened and you can figure out why, then you can try to avoid that bad thing happening again. That's the purpose of memory. It's not to remember the past. It's to stop the same damn thing from happening over and over. So I thought I could simplify Mrs. S's life. I could tell her suspicions of rape were fully justified and that her doubt about the events was nothing but additional evidence of her thorough and long-term victimization. I could insist that her sexual partners had a legal obligation to ensure that she was not too impaired by alcohol to give consent. I could tell her that she had indisputably been subjected to violent and illicit acts unless she had consented to each sexual move explicitly and verbally. I could tell her that she was an innocent victim. I could have told her all of that, and it would have been true, and she would have accepted it as true and remembered it for the rest of her life. She would have been a new person with a new history and a new destiny. But I also thought I could tell Miss S that she's a walking disaster. I could tell her that she wanders into a bar like a courtesan in a coma, and that she is a danger to herself and others, that she needs to wake up, and if she goes into singles bars and drinks too much and then is taken home and has rough, violent sex, or even tender, caring sex, then what the hell does she expect? In other words, I could have told her in more philosophical terms that she was Nietzsche's pale criminal, the person who at the moment dares to break the sacred law and at the next shrinks from paying the price. And that would have been true too, and she would have accepted it as such and remembered it. If I had been adherent to the left-wing social justice ideology, I would have told her the first story. If I had been adherent to a conservative ideology, I would have told her the second story. And her responses, after having been told either the first or the second story, would have proved to my satisfaction and hers that the whole story I had told her was true, completely, irrefutably true. And that would have been advice. Excuse me. So, hey, Logic is here. Hey, driving, listening, just got out of work. Awesome. Glad to have you here. This is really neat. And congrats on the job. So, yay, Logic. All right. Figure it out yourself. I decided instead to listen. I have learned not to steal my clients' problems from them. I don't want to be the redeeming hero or the deus ex machina, not in someone else's story. I don't want their lives. So I asked her to tell me what she thought, and I listened. She talked a lot. When we were finished, she still didn't know if she had been raped, and neither did I. Life is very complicated. Sometimes you have to change the way you understand everything to properly understand a single something. Was I raped? Can be a very complicated question. The mere fact that the question would present itself in the form indicates the existence of infinite layers of complexity, to say nothing of 5 times. There are a myriad of questions hidden inside was I raped? What is rape? What is consent? What constitutes appropriate sexual caution? How should a person defend herself? Where does the fault lie? Was I raped is a hydra. If you cut off the head of a hydra, 7 more grow. That's life. Miss S would have had to talk for 20 years to figure it out if she had been raped, and someone would have had to be there to listen. I started the process, but circumstances made it impossible for me to finish. She left therapy with me only somewhat less ill-informed and vague than when she first met me. But at least she didn't leave as the living embodiment of my damaged ideology. The people I listen to need to talk because it's how people think. People need to think. Otherwise, they wander blindly into pits. When people think, they simulate the world and plan how to act in it. If they do a good job of simulating, they can figure out what stupid things they shouldn't do. Then they can not do them. Then they don't have to suffer the consequences. That's the purpose of thinking. But we can't do it alone. We simulate the world and plan our actions out in it. Only human beings do this. That's how brilliant we are. We make little avatars of ourselves. We place those avatars in fictional worlds. Then we watch what happens. If our avatar thrives, then we will act like he does in the real world. Then we will thrive, we hope. If our avatar fails, we don't go there if we have any sense. We let him die in the fictional world so that we don't have to really die in the present. Imagine 2 children talking. The younger one says, "Wouldn't it be fun to climb up on the roof?" He has just placed his little avatar of himself in a fictional world, but his older sister objects. She chimes in, "That's stupid," she says. "What if you fall off the roof? What if Dad catches you?" The younger child can then modify the original simulation, draw the appropriate conclusions, and let the fictional world wither on the vine. Or not. Maybe the risk is worth it. But at least now he can be factored in. The fictional world is a bit more complete and the avatar a bit wiser. People think that they think, but that's not true. It's mostly self-criticism that passes for thinking. True thinking is rare, just like true listening. Thinking is listening to yourself. It's difficult to think. You have to be at least 2 people at the same time. Then you have to let those people disagree. Thinking is an internal dialogue between 2 or more different views of the world. Viewpoint 1 is an avatar in a simulated world. It has its own representations of past, present, and future, and its own ideas about how to act. So do viewpoints 2 and 3 and 4. Thinking is the process by which these internal avatars imagine and articulate their world one to another. You can't set straw men against one another when you're thinking either, because then that's thinking you're not, because then you're not thinking. You're rationalizing post hoc. You're matching what you want against a weak opponent so that you don't have to change your mind. You're propagandizing. You're using doublespeak. You're using your conclusions to justify your proofs. You're hiding from the truth. True thinking is complex and demanding. It requires you be an articulate speaker and a careful, judicious listener at the same time. It involves conflict, so you have to tolerate conflict. Conflict involves negotiating and compromising, so you have to learn to give and take and to modify your premises and adjust your thoughts. Even your preconceptions of the world. Sometimes it results in the defeat and elimination of one or more internal avatar. They don't like to be defeated and eliminated either. They're hard to build. They're valuable. They're alive. They like to stay alive. They fight to stay alive. You better listen to them. If you don't, they'll go underground and turn into devils and torture you. In consequence, thinking is emotionally painful as well as psychologically demanding more than anything else, except not thinking. But you have to be very articulate and sophisticated to have all this occur inside your own head. What are you to do then if you aren't good at thinking, at being two people at one time? That's easy. You talk. But you need someone to listen. A listening person is your collaborator and your opponent. Oh my gosh, I was talking with some woman today because I was trying to figure out whether or not we had reached herd immunity. I found some stuff on the CDC pages that I found hard to believe. And it turned out that I shouldn't have believed it, not the way that they had phrased it. They were insinuating one thing and not being entirely honest about how they were passing the information along. They said that, over 300 doses of the vaccine had been given, or 300 million doses of the vaccine had been given. And I was like, that's almost the population of the United States. I don't know if I believe that. And it was the way they phrased it. They said doses. They didn't say, that many people had been vaccinated. That's a different number, and you have to dig deeper on their website in order to find that number, because some of the vaccines are 2 doses. Some of the vaccines are only 1 dose. Some of the vaccines still confer, being vaccinated, even if they're 2 dose, but you only get 1 dose. So it's all very vague and fuzzy, and they're not being very clear about it. But they really want you to get the vaccine, and so they make it seem like, oh, everybody's doing it. You should do it too. And so, yeah, the CDC is involved in some propagandizing right now. And I put that question forward. I was like, hey, help me figure this out, because this is weird to me, and I don't get it, and I don't understand it, and I don't know why this is going on. And there was an epidemiologist, a virologist, who answered, except that instead of saying, oh no, here's where you screwed up, here's what you need to do, this is how we formulate this stuff, do it this way, read from this site, or this piece of information on the CDC website, not the other one, because that's unclear. She didn't do any of that. She wasn't a proper opponent. She didn't really listen to me. She immediately thought that I was an anti-vaxxer, that I was an anti-lockdown person, and all of it. And she just screamed at me, and she called me willfully ignorant. I'm like, lady, I'm asking questions. How am I being willfully ignorant if I am trying to resolve my ignorance? And she would write me these nasty comments and then block me. And then, I found her email. And so I wrote her and I was like, hey, I think you're confused. I'm not trying to be, it's very polite through the whole thing. And she would just, just angry, and blocked me again. And I was like, what is going on? And she's a teacher, no less. I'm like, I know you don't treat your students like this. Why are you treating me like this? And it was because she had made up in her mind who I was, and she had gotten a false picture of me. And she even said that she was angry at somebody else and had taken it out on me, when it wasn't my fault at all. But did she then change her behavior towards me? No, not an iota. She was still stuck in that gear of being, angry online person. So I've been trying these days to get rid of all my trolling, just not get angry at anybody, even if they troll me, just to deal with them in a very calm and compassionate manner, so that I can not engage in bad behavior, but also so that I can think and maybe bring them around. You can't bring somebody around when you're fighting them. So, Survival says, I'll wait until it's fully tested. Yes, same thing, especially since I have an extremely rare condition. I mean, they're not going to find anybody else like me to take this to see how my disability reacts to it. But if I can have enough people say it be safe, then yeah, I'll take the risk. So Survival says, how is it that people are now so enthusiastic about trusting big pharma paired up with big government? Yeah. That's also, I mean, and that they don't realize that they've gone 180 on a lot of these views. Everybody before this happened was like, down with big pharma, they're awful, down with big government. And then suddenly big pharma's great, and it's what do you call it? It's compartmentalized thinking and cognitive dissonance all at the same time. Shaman says, don't follow the follower. Yeah, that's another one. Justice says, there's givers and takers in this world. It's easy to see who's what. Not always. But yes, I do agree. I would just put in that caveat, not always. Justice says, my cat just brought a mouse inside and now he's trying to find it. Oh no. Hopefully he finds it so you don't have mice running around in the house. But it's better than rats. So, but yeah, I'm trying to be a better person online and have more conversations and talk with people more. And not be combative just because I can't see the person in front of me. Because you know that if I had met this person on the street, they wouldn't behave like that at all. They wouldn't throw a fit and gnash their teeth and rend their clothes. It's just not the way that people behave. We would be polite to one another. We guard our tongue, sort of thing. So, Justice says, compartmentalized thinking has been a big part of my experience. Yeah. And it's extremely useful for certain things. You take this problem and you put it in a box and you put it over there and you say, I'm not going to deal with that right now. I'm going to deal with this. So yeah, but it can also trip you up if you never unpack it and deal with it and integrate it into, the whole of you. Then you can have one box that says, up and the other box says down, and the two don't connect. And so you just end up doing things like being enthusiastic about big pharma and big government when you were just yelling about them the day before, So, yeah, we are strange creatures. We are really strange creatures. So we talk. This is how we work things out. A listening person tests your talking and your thinking without having to say anything. A listening person is a representative of common humanity. He stands for the crowd. Now, the crowd is by no means always right, but it is commonly right. It is typically right. If you say something that takes everyone aback, therefore, you should reconsider what you said. I say that knowing full well that controversial opinions are sometimes correct, sometimes so much so that the crowd will perish if it refuses to listen. It is for this reason, among others, that the individual is morally obliged to stand up and tell the truth of his or her own experience. But something new and radical is still almost always wrong. You need good, even great reasons to ignore or defy general public opinion. That's your culture. It's a mighty oak. You perch on one of its branches. If the branch breaks, that's a long way down, farther perhaps than you think. And, just like we were talking about, there's good reason to go against the crowd right now because they're being contradictory in their own beliefs and their own statements. So even though people will be taken aback by not wanting to get the vax right now, there's good solid reason behind that. So Justice says, amen. I've done the second things, which is what I'm working on. We all work on that stuff. We all do, Justice. So Survival says sometimes going with the flow is not the optimal way. Yep. It's hard to work against the flow, but it might be the right idea. Yeah. I don't know if I've told you guys this story, but dodgeball. We would play dodgeball in grade school, and everybody in the crowd would run together this way. And when they did that, I always ran in the opposite direction. I was not going to be part of the crowd because the crowd is a large target. You just throw the ball in the general direction, you're going to hit somebody. And so I knew if I didn't want to be targeted, move away from the crowd, move away from the big, shiny, uh, bullseye. So, yeah, sometimes going against the flow is the smartest thing in the world to do. It's difficult though, because you are standing out there alone. You don't have your friends around you. You're not all in it together sort of thing. You are being, I think the word is iconoclast. I'm not sure. It's one of those words where you just, you do your own thing. So, but yeah, it's something. If you're talking about tradition, things that are traditional, there's a reason why these things have stood the test of time, so to speak. Those are the things that you might not want to go against, but yeah, if you just go with the flow when it's something new, that might not be the best. So Survival says, you put yourself out there for criticism. Yeah, it's easy for the crowd to turn on you, and you're out there alone, and they're all pointing their finger at you, going, "Oh, woe be unto you! You're not doing the right thing." So yeah, it can be lonely, but it can also be a hell of a lot safer. So, if you're reading this book, there's a strong probability that you're a privileged person. You can read. You have time to read. You're perched high in the clouds. It took untold generations to get where you are. A little gratitude might be in order. If you're going to insist on bending the world to your way, you better have your reasons. You better have thought them through. You might otherwise be in for a very hard landing. You should do what other people do unless you have a very good reason not to. If you're in a rut, at least you know that other people have traveled that path. Out of the rut is too often off the road, and in the desert that awaits off the road, there are highwaymen and monsters. So speaks wisdom. There goes the 8:30 train, and we're about to take a quick break. We'll play the song again. But yeah, it's what he's talking about, going with the flow and going with people, is really going with tradition. Those things that countless others have traveled that path, and that's the path to glory. But then your life may be extremely unusual. You may be, like me, somebody with a chronic illness, and the path that everybody takes is a path that I can't take just because of who I am and my circumstances. So in that case, you find another, group of traditional things that have stood the test of time, self-care, that kind of sort of thing. Yeah, Survival says American privilege. Absolutely. And, our ancestors worked really hard to get us here. Our grandfathers sacrificed in ways that we can't even imagine. Our great grandfathers sacrificed in ways that we have no conception of. Because it's a time we can't even imagine. Back before the internet, back before computers, back before TVs, back before telephones, back before the radio, when everybody communicated by snail mail and things like that. I mean, and you didn't know something that had happened until weeks later. So Survival says our ancestors fought hard for American privilege. Absolutely they did. Absolutely they did. I mean, first off, they came here, most of us. Lawrence has Native American blood, so his people traveled over under even more harsh conditions. We all came to North America one way or another and just faced problems that we can't even imagine of these days. Scurvy, infection without any penicillin around, that kind of thing. No toilet paper, So, oh, cool. Kevin's back. Lawrence says, yep, my mother was Native American. Right. And so, her people came across either the chain of islands before, during the ice ages, or the going over the bridge that existed from Siberia to Canada. I mean, people really made some brave decisions and fought really hard to give us the privilege that we have today. So we shouldn't take it for granted. We should feel very blessed. I feel very blessed. I know I feel very blessed because I've lived without running water. I've lived where the only heat was from a wood burning stove. And, you woke up in the middle of the night because it got so damn cold because the fire had gone out, and you hope to God there's still some embers glowing in there so you can relight it and don't have to put, more fuel on it. And yeah. Lauren says, my father came from Italy and his great grandmother from Ethiopia. Wow. Yeah. See, those are some lives that have lived and done a lot to get all of us here on this live tonight. They did a lot for us. So thank you, ancestors. But yeah. So, a listening person. Do we want to take our break now? I kind of, we have people that have come back and joined us, but I'll do a little reading in this and then we'll take our break. We're on page 243. So, a listening person. A listening person can reflect the crowd. He can do that without talking. He can do that merely by letting the talking person listen to himself. That's what Freud recommended. He had his patients lie on a couch, look at the ceiling, let their minds wander, and say whatever wandered in. That's his method of free association. That's the way the Freudian psychologist avoids transferring his or her own personal biases and opinions into the internal landscape of the patient. It was for such reasons that Freud did not face his patients. He did not want their spontaneous meditations to be altered by his emotional expressions, no matter how slight. He was properly concerned that his own opinion, and worse, his own unresolved problems, would find themselves uncontrollably reflected in his responses and reactions, conscious and unconscious alike. He was afraid that in such a manner detrimentally affect the development of his patients. It was for such reasons as well that Freud insisted that psychoanalysts be analyzed themselves. He wanted those who practiced his method to uncover and eliminate some of their own worst blind spots and prejudices so that they would not be practicing corruptly. Freud had a point. He was, after all, a genius. You can tell that because people still hate him. Isn't that a great way to indicate whether or not somebody's a genius? People still hate him. So, but there are disadvantages to the detached and somewhat distant approach recommended by Freud. Many of those who seek therapy desire and need a closer, more personal relationship, although that has its dangers. This is in part why I have opted in my practice for the conversation instead of the Freudian method, as have most clinical psychologists. It can be worthwhile for my clients to see my reactions. To protect them from the undue influence that might produce, I attempt to set my aim properly so that my responses emerge from the appropriate motivation. I do what I can to want the best for them, whatever that might be. I do my best to want the best, period, as well, because that is part of wanting the best for my clients. I try and clear my mind and to leave my own concerns aside. That way, I am concentrating on what is best for my clients, and while I am simultaneously alert to any cues that I might be misunderstanding what the best is. That's something that has to be negotiated, not assumed on my part. It's something that has to be managed carefully to mitigate the risks of close personal interactions. My clients talk, I listen. Sometimes I respond. Often the response is subtle, it's not even verbal. My clients and I face each other. We make eye contact. We see each other's expressions. They can observe the effects of their words on me, and I can observe the effects of mine on them. They can respond to my responses. Oh, Kevin's leaving. Oh, people want a break time. All right, we'll do a break time now. All right, Kevin, be well. People are saying good night. But yeah, we'll take a break from this now. They can respond to my responses. So we are on page 244, and I will put on some music, and we will do a smoke break so that people can go and enjoy themselves for a little while. Let's see, what do we want to do? We want to do this one. There we go.
He's got clout.
Whoops.
You got to be oriented towards something, because otherwise you're disoriented. You just spin around in circles, and then you suffer, and so do people around you. It's not a good solution. Orient yourself towards something. You have to figure out what it is. What will work for you? What goal would justify the suffering of your life? Start trying to piece that together. You're going to get better at it. Start trying to piece that together. You're going to get better at it. But it's a personal process, so you need a personal place to stand, because otherwise you're going to be handed a place to stand on a plate. And it may be one that makes you a puppet of someone else's goals. So I would say, what are the processes? Well, I think what I've recommended to people is clean up your room. 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 Then you'll know what to do next. See if you can stop saying things you know to be lies. That's not the same as telling the truth. You don't get to do that to begin with, because you're not good enough at it to even attempt it in some sense. But everyone can stop saying things they know to be falsehoods. Stop saying things that violate your conscience. Here's another idea. Stop saying and doing things that make you feel weak. All you have to do is pay attention to that. Some things you do will make you feel disintegrated. It's a physiological sensation. Some things improve your integrity, and some things disintegrate you. The things that disintegrate you, you often do to impress other people. You're escaping what you know to be your moral obligation, and your moral obligation stems naturally from your aims. And if you don't have an aim, well then, you're aimless. Clean up your room. 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 what to do next. I had a girl come up to me last night. She said, I started cleaning up my room and it completely changed my life. She said, your room is an externalization of your mind. That's right. That's exactly true. To the degree that you're in your room, the room is you. So straighten up what you can straighten up and quit saying things that make you feel weak. And then you'll know what to do next. Clean up your room. 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 Then you'll know what to do next. It's like, hey, man, you have a room. Most people throughout human history have not had a room. You have a room. Well, my room's a hellhole. It's like, well, then you're a denizen of hell inhabiting it. You should do something about that. Well, what? Well, put it in minimal order. Get your clothes together, because you have to wear those. People are looking at your clothes. What clothes should you be wearing? Not the clothes of a total wretched loser. How about that? What about your bed? Well, is it comfortable? Do you make it right there so it looks like half civilized? Can you sleep there? It's like, is there junk everywhere so you just hate your life when you walk into your room? It's like, clean the damn thing up. See if you can do it. Order your drawers. Learn to fold your clothes. Put it in minimal order. And then, man, you can get spectacular. You said, put a plant in there. It's like, maybe I can make it beautiful.
All right, we are back. I hope everybody was able to get their smoke break and bathroom break in. I was, thankfully. it was the right time to take the break, and I didn't even realize it until I was like, oh, yeah, better go do that now. So Sean is, there were some things that went up while the song was going on. Survival said there's an art to listening. Big shout out to the good people here tonight. Yes. Shaman says, truths to survival. People hear, but do they listen? Survival answered, that's a key question. I think I may have a hard time listening. Shaman says, sometimes it depends on the communicator too. Some are just hard to follow. Going on with some kind of blind chatter. Yes. And Survival agrees and says, very true, Sean. Yeah. And then every once in a while, you'll get that blind chatter, and then something will be extremely important in the middle of it. And it kind of, it's like the scene from American Pie, and one time in band camp, and then suddenly, boom, there's that phrase, and, the whole audience gets shocked. So, all right. A client of mine may say, I hate my wife. It's out there, once said. It's hanging in the air. It has emerged from the underworld, materialized from chaos, and manifested itself. It's perceptible and concrete and no longer easily ignored. It's become real. The speaker has even startled himself. He sees the same thing reflected in my eyes. He notes that and continues on the road to sanity. Hold it, he says. Back up. That's too harsh. Sometimes I hate my wife. I hate her when she won't tell me what she wants. My mom did that all the time too. It drove Dad crazy. It drove all of us crazy, to tell you the truth. It even drove Mom crazy. She was a nice person, but she was very resentful. Well, at least my wife isn't as bad as my mother. Not at all. Wait, I guess my wife is actually pretty good at telling me what she wants, but I get really bothered when she doesn't, because Mom tortured us half to death being a martyr. That really affected me. Maybe I overreact now when it happens a bit. Hey, I'm acting just like Dad did when Mom upset him. That isn't me. That doesn't have anything to do with my wife. I better let her know. I observe all this, that my client had failed previously to properly distinguish his wife from his mother, and I see that He was possessed unconsciously by the spirit of his father. He sees all of that too. Now he is a bit more differentiated, a bit less on an uncarved block, a bit less hidden in the fog. He has sewed up a small tear in the fabric of his culture. He says, "That was a good session, Dr. Peterson." I nod. "You can be pretty smart if you can just shut up." I'm a collaborator and an opponent even when I'm not talking. I can't help it. My expressions broadcast my response even when they're subtle. So I'm communicating, as Freud so rightly stressed, even when silenced. But I also talk in my clinical sessions. How do I know when to say something? First, as I said, I put myself in the proper frame of mind. I aim properly. I want things to be better. My mind orients itself given this goal. It tries to produce responses to the therapeutic dialogue that furthers that aim. I watch it happen internally. I reveal my responses. That's the first rule. Sometimes, for example, a client will say something and a thought will occur to me or a fantasy flit through my mind. Frequently, it's about something that was said by the same client earlier that day or during a previous session. Then I tell my client that thought or fantasy disinterestedly. I say, "You said this, and I noticed that. Then I became aware of this." Then we discuss it. We try and determine the relevance or meaning of my reaction. Sometimes, perhaps, it's about me. That was Freud's point. But sometimes it's just a reaction of a detached but positively inclined human being to a personally revealing statement by another human being. It's meaningful, sometimes even corrective. Sometimes, however, it's me that gets corrected. You have to get along with other people. A therapist is one of those other people. A good therapist will tell you the truth about what he thinks. That is not the same as telling you what he thinks is the truth. Then at least you have the honest opinion of at least one other person. That's not so easy to get. That's not nothing. That's key to the psychotherapeutic process. Two people will tell each other the truth and both listen. So, Shaman says, even if you have a SIHT day, you will at least have made bed to sleep in that night. Oh, referring back to the song. Yeah. Clean up your room. Survival says, I love that speech so dang much. Yep. I think we all do. It's the little things like that can change, how you react at the end of the day to your day and things like that. Coming to a solid bed. Survival says, I know how this feels. Believe it or not, people like to talk to me about their problems. I believe it because you are a very non-judgmental person. You are somebody who really empathizes with other people's survival, and you're very kind. You watch out for others, and it's a wonderful thing. You're a great addition to this group. I'm glad to have you here. Survival says, I have to orient my mind for helping. Yes, and that's exactly what Jordan Peterson is talking about. Orienting his mind towards the good. And when you do that, your mind will, like a ship riding itself in the water, it will steer around towards that aim of helping or that aim of, the good. So we are on the next section here. How should you listen? Carl Rogers, one of the 20th century's greatest psychotherapists, knew something about listening. He wrote, the great majority of us cannot listen. We find ourselves compelled to evaluate because listening is too dangerous. The first requirement is courage, and we do not always have it. He knew that listening could transform people. On that, Rogers commented, some of you may be feeling that you listen well to people and that you have never seen such results. The chances are very great indeed that your listening has not been the type I have described. He suggested that his readers conduct a short experiment when they next found themselves in a dispute. Stop the discussion for a moment and institute this rule. Each person can speak up for himself only after he has first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker accurately and to the speaker's satisfaction. So what you do is, if you're having an argument or you're going back and forth, it's kind of what they taught us in tech support. You know, the person on the phone will state, this problem, and you say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is, and you repeat it in your own words, what they said, and then you say, do I have that right? And sometimes they're like, no, that's not the problem. Or sometimes they'll be like, yeah, that's my problem. Let's deal with it. So, and you both people go back and forth like that. And then you know that you're actually listening to what they said. You heard what they said because you can repeat it back to them to their satisfaction. I have found this technique very useful in my private life and in my practice. I routinely summarize what people have said to me and ask them if I have understood properly. Sometimes they accept my summary. Sometimes I am offered a small correction. Now and then I am wrong completely. All of that is good to know. There are several primary advantages to this process of summary. The first advantage is that I genuinely come to understand what the other person is saying. Of this, Rogers notes, sounds simple, doesn't it? But if you try it, you will discover it is one of the most difficult things you have ever tried to do. If you really understand a person in this way, if you are willing to enter his private world and see the way life appears to him, you run the risk of being changed yourself. You might see it his way. You might find yourself influenced in your attitudes or personality. This risk of being changed is one of the most frightening prospects most of us can face. Most salutary words have rarely ever been written, or more salutary words have rarely ever been written. And I think this is the problem that we see with Twitter and TikTok and places where our characters are limited. You can, Survival says you can form the issue. Yeah. And Twitter and TikTok and other message boards don't allow us to do that because they only give us a certain amount of characters. You don't have the space to come back and say, what I'm hearing is, do I have that correct? It's these little bites that make us bite one another because the other person doesn't think we're listening or that we don't understand or whatever, and it just devolves very quickly. So when you have, comments that are more long form, like on YouTube and things like that, that's when people can, really get into a conversation. Shaman says that Jordan Peterson interview. So what you're saying is, yes, yep, he does it all the time. And the whole idea of straw manning when he was there with Sam, what's his name? I've forgotten it. The atheist, where they were both talking about God back and forth, and they had a really hard time with it. But yeah, the anchor was wrecked. I'm not getting that. But yeah, if you can explain that to me, I don't understand what that means. But anyway, I'll go back to this. The second advantage to the active summary is that it aids the person in consolidation and utility of memory. Consider the following situation. A client in my practice recounts a long, meandering, emotional-laden account of a difficult period in his or her life. We summarize back and forth. The account becomes shorter. It's now summed up in my client's memory and in mine in the form we discussed. It is now a different memory in many ways. With luck, a better memory. It is now less weighty. It has been distilled, reduced to the gist. We have extracted the moral of the story. It becomes a descriptive of the cause and the result of what happened, formulated such that repetition of the tragedy and the pain becomes less likely in the future. This is what happened. This is why. This is what I have to do to avoid such things from now on. That's a successful memory. That's the purpose of memory. You remember the past not so much that it is an account accurately recorded to say it again, but so you are prepared for the future. The person who was anchoring, got it, was wrecked. The interviewer with the feminist, news anchor, yes. She was, she got destroyed. And Shaman said she was truly speechless. Yeah. That's still a meme to this day. And it was so brilliant to watch that and to watch him in action and just see him not let her get his goat. And she got her own goat as a result. And it was just very amusing to watch. It was hard on Peterson, though. He said that he was really exhausted afterwards, and I don't blame him. Going into that kind of confrontation setting under the guise of being interviewed. Yeah. So the third advantage to employing the Rogerian method is the difficulty it poses to the careless construction of strawman arguments. When someone opposes you, it is very tempting to oversimplify, parody, or distort his or her position. This is a counterproductive game designed both to harm the dissenter and to unjustly raise your personal status. By contrast, if you are called upon to summarize someone's position so that the speaking person agrees with that summary, you may have to state the argument even more clearly and succinctly than the speaker has even yet managed. That's what steel manning is. You first give the devil his due, looking at his arguments from his perspective. You can, 1, find the value in them and learn something in the process, or 2, hone your positions against them if you still believe that they are wrong, and strengthen your arguments further against the challenge. This will make you much stronger. Then you will no longer have to misrepresent your opponent's position, and you may well have bridged at least part of the gap between the two of you. You will also be much better at withstanding your own doubts. Sometimes it takes a long time to figure out what someone genuinely means when they are talking. This is because often they are articulating their ideas for the first time. They can't do it without wandering down blind alleys or making contradictory and even nonsensical claims. This is partly because talking and thinking is often more about forgetting than about remembering. To discuss an event, particularly something emotional like the death or serious illness, is to slowly choose what to leave behind. To begin, however, much that is not necessary must be put into words. The emotion-laden speaker must recount the whole experience in detail. Only then can the central narrative, cause and consequence, come into focus or consolidate itself. Only then can the moral of the story be derived. Imagine that someone holds a stack of $100 bills, some of which are counterfeit. All the bills might have to be spread out on a table so each can be seen and any difference noted before the genuine can be distinguished from the fake. This is the sort of methodical approach you have to take when really listening to someone trying to solve a problem or communicate something important. If upon learning that some of the bills are counterfeit, you too casually dismiss all of them as you would if you were in a hurry or otherwise unwilling to put the effort in, the person will never learn to separate wheat from chaff. If you listen instead, without premature judgment, people will generally tell you everything that they are thinking with very little deceit. People will tell you the most amazing, absurd, interesting things. Very few of your conversations will be boring. You can, in fact, tell whether or not you are actually listening in this manner. If the conversation is boring, you probably aren't. Brushing people off, survival says. Yes, yes, very much that. Primate dominance, hierarchy, maneuvers, and wit. Not all talking is thinking, nor does all listening foster transformation. There are other motives for both, some of which produce much less valuable, counterproductive, and even dangerous outcomes. There is the conversation, for example, where one participant is speaking merely to establish or confirm his place in the dominance hierarchy. One person begins telling a story about some interesting occurrence, recent or past, that involved something good, bad, or surprising enough to make the listening worthwhile. The other person, now concerned with his or her potentially substandard status as a less interesting individual, immediately thinks of something better or worse or more surprising to relate. This isn't one of those situations where two conversational participants are genuinely playing off each other, riffing on the same things for mutual enjoyment of both and everyone else. This is jockeying for position, pure and simple. You can tell when one of those conversations is occurring. They are accompanied by a feeling of embarrassment among speakers and listeners alike, all of whom know that something false and exaggerated has just been said. There is another closely allied form of conversation where neither the speaker is listening nor in the least to the other. Instead, each is using time occupied by the current speaker to conjure up what he or she will say next, which will often bring something off topic because the person anxiously waiting to speak has not been listening. This can and will bring the whole conversational train to a shuddering halt. At this point, it is usual for those who are on board during the crash to remain silent and to look occasionally and in a somewhat embarrassed manner at each other until everyone leaves, or someone thinks of something witty and puts Humpty Dumpty together again. Then there is the conversation where one participant is trying to attain victory for his point of view. This is yet another variant of the dominance hierarchy conversation. During such a conversation, which often tends towards the ideological, the speaker endeavors to, one, denigrate or ridicule the viewpoint of anyone holding a contrary position, two, use the selective evidence while doing so, and finally, three, impress the listeners, many of whom are already occupying the same ideological space, with the validity of his assertions. The goal is to gain support for a comprehensive, unitary, oversimplified worldview. Thus, the purpose of the conversation is to make the case that non-thinking is the correct tack. The person who is speaking in this manner believes that winning the argument makes him right, and that doing so necessarily validates the assumption structure of the dominance hierarchy he most identifies with. This is often, and unsurprisingly, the hierarchy within which he has achieved the most success, or the one with which he is most temperamentally aligned. Your lane, in other words. Almost all discussions involving politics or economics unfold in this manner, with each participant attempting to justify fixed a priori positions instead of trying to learn something or adopt a different frame, even for the novelty. It is for this reason that conservatives and liberals alike believe that their positions to be self-evident, particularly as they become more extreme. Given certain temperamentally based assumptions, a predictable conclusion emerges, but only when you ignore the fact that the assumptions themselves are mutable. These conversations are very different from the listening type. When a genuine listening conversation is taking place, one person at a time has the floor and everyone else is listening. The person speaking is granted the opportunity to seriously discuss some event, usually unhappy or even tragic. Everyone else responds sympathetically. The conversations are important because the speaker is organizing the troublesome events in his or her mind while recounting the story. The fact is important enough to bear repeating. People organize their brains with conversation. If they don't have anyone to tell their story to, they lose their minds. Like hoarders, they cannot unclutter themselves. The input of the community is required for the integrity of the individual psyche. To put it in another way, it takes a village to organize a mind. And we kind of did that with Pizza Dad Bod. You know, we listened when he came in. We weren't just trying to prove a point, or you know, people weren't trying to hammer their ideology home. You know, we asked him why he believed the way he believed, you know, what brought him to these conclusions. We truly listened, and we put up why we think different than that, but it wasn't in order to win or to, destroy an argument or anything like that. It was genuinely to learn about the other side. It was a real conversation, so you all deserve a pat on the back for that one. And as a result, he became a friend. And, it doesn't matter that he has different views on different things. We value what Pizza Dad Bod has to bring to the conversation because, he thinks in an interesting way. So, Shaman says the bullshit artist. Yeah. They get annoying really fast. Survival says conservatives get real tired of being pushed on. Yep. Passive in nature, there's only so much they can take. Yes, I agree. And that's kind of the social fabric that we have right now. But there are other conversations taking place. And I see it online too, where people are trying to bridge those divides. Not all of those bridges are genuine. I've found a few faulty ones where, people couldn't take necessary criticism, to them being rude or other such things. But hey, DC Irish is in the house. So hey, how you doing? But other places there are genuine conversations taking place between conservatives and liberals, and a lot of the conclusions from these conversations are we have more in common than we have differences on, and the differences are being exploited by the people in positions of power. They like us divided because then we don't join together against them. So Iris says, I'm doing alive and free. Hallelujah. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. So I'm going to take another sip of this. And we got about 25 minutes to go. Yes, I am drinking Red Bull this late, Irish. It's migraine juice. So, I can drink a Red Bull and go right to sleep. Yeah, the caffeine and the sugar and the B vitamins and all that really, really help my head. So, but yeah, I had Aura before I came on, so I took a pill and I grabbed a Red Bull, and so that's keeping me from getting a massive headache. All right, so we're talking about conversations, Irish, and listening, and how to listen and talk to somebody else. We just got through straw manning and steel manning and stuff like that. So Christy says, I read a book and it said when people tell you their problems, they're not always wanting it solved. Just listen. Yes. I think that what they said was that men like to solve problems and women like to commiserate, be there for the other person's emotional state, that kind of thing. It was it's funny because I'm actually a problem solver more than I am a commiserator. I'm like, those emotions, you'll get over those, DC says, okay, I will shut up. No, I'm not telling you to shut you up. I was telling you so that I could catch you up as we jump into the next section. So Survival says, if I had a Red Bull at this hour, I'd be sleepwalking. Ask Christy. So, all right. So let's see. It takes a village to organize a mind. That's the last part that we were on. Much of what we consider healthy mental functions is the result of our ability to use the reactions of others to keep our complex selves functional. We outsource the problem of our sanity. This is why it is the fundamental responsibility of parents to render their children socially acceptable. If a person's behavior is such that other people can tolerate them, then all he has to do is place himself in a social context. Then people will indicate by being interested in or bored by what he says, or laughing or not laughing at his jokes, or teasing or ridiculing, or even by lifting an eyebrow, whether his actions and statements are what they should be. Everyone is always broadcasting to everyone else their desire to encounter the ideal. We punish and reward each other precisely to the degree that each of us behaves in keeping with that desire, except, of course, when we are looking for trouble. The sympathetic responses offered during a genuine conversation indicate that the teller is valued and that the story being told is important, serious, deserving of consideration, and understandable. Men and women often misunderstand each other when these conversations are focused on a specific problem. Men are often accused of wanting to fix things. Hey, we were just talking about this too early on in the discussion. This frustrates men who like to solve problems and do it efficiently, and who are, in fact, called upon frequently by women for precisely that purpose. It might be easier for my male readers to understand why this does not work, however, if they could realize and then remember that before a problem can be solved, it must be formulated precisely. Women are often intent on formulating the problem when they are discussing something and they need to be listened to, even questioned, to help ensure clarity in the formation. Then whatever problem is left, if any, can be helpfully solved. It should also be noted that too early problem solving may also merely indicate a desire to escape from the effort of the problem formulating conversation. I got a fur on my upper lip. Basically saying that, if somebody's trying to fix it before you've said everything that you need to say, that they're just trying to jettison themselves from the conversation. So another conversational variant is the lecture. Who likes a lecture? A lecture is, somewhat surprisingly, a conversation. The lecturer speaks, but the audience communicates with him or her non-verbally. A surprising amount of human interaction, much of the delivery of emotional information, for example, takes place in this manner, through postural display and facial emotion, as we noted in our discussion of Freud. A good lecturer is not only delivering facts, which perhaps is the least important part of a lecture, but also telling stories about those facts, pitching them precisely on the level of the audience's comprehension, gauging that by the interest they are showing. The story he or she is telling conveys to the members of the audience not only what the facts are, but why they are relevant, why it is important to know certain things about which they are currently ignorant. To demonstrate the importance of some set of facts is to tell those audience members how such knowledge could change their behavior or influence the way they interpret the world, so that they will now be able to avoid some obstacle and progress more rapidly to some better goals. Peterson talked about this when he would do his lectures and talks like that, where he knew that he had hit on something when the entire audience became silent and they were just on the edge of their seats just looking at him. And he knew that he was really conveying something that was important when people were so engaged with what he was saying on stage. Christy, my cat talks in his sleep. DC says, I'm just listening now. Lol. Christy says, I try to solve problems, so I always try to remember just to listen and empathize without trying to solve the issue. It's harder than it seems. It's a lot harder than it seems. And Survival says Christy is a boss at work. I could imagine. I mean, she runs a tight household, and you guys were great at putting the tree in the yard. So, yeah, I can see her being a boss at work. So, all right. A good lecturer is thus talking with and not at or even to his or her listeners. To manage this, the lecturer needs to be closely attending to the audience's every move, gesture, and sound. Perversely, this cannot be done by watching the audience as such. A good lecturer speaks directly and watches the response of a single identifiable people instead of doing something cliche such as presenting a talk to an audience. Everything about that phrase is wrong. You don't present, you talk. He's got a footnote here. The strategy of speaking to individuals is not only vital to the delivery to any message, it is a useful antidote to fear of public speaking. No one wants to be stared at by hundreds of unfriendly, judgmental eyes. However, almost everyone can talk to just one attentive person. So if you have to deliver a speech, another terrible phrase, then do just that. Talk to the individual in the audience and don't hide, not behind the podium, not with downcast eyes, not by speaking too quickly or mumbling, not by apologizing for your lack of brilliance or preparedness, not behind the ideas are not yours, and not behind cliches. So, Survival says Peterson is doing his best at, what is that? Uncommying the commie kids. Yes. Communism. I mean, communism works with a small group of people, and communism is kind of how, totalitarianism is kind of how a household is run. You got the people in charge, the people who listen, and things are given to the kids. The kids have chores, and there's the whole idea of everybody pitches into the family and things like that. But you can't do it on large scale, and you can't do it with strangers and things like that. Latin patriots. What about arrogant braggers? Well, those people we talked about earlier, they're not talking to talk. They're not talking to have a conversation. They're talking to jockey themselves into a position in the hierarchy. And you can usually, you can sometimes maneuver around them by, just not paying attention to what they have to brag about and making that known in your facial expressions, rolled eyes, things like that. Where it's like, oh yeah, you're just here to impress people, and that's not talking. So that's what I would say to that. Survival says those guys are the hype men. Yeah, and some people are just there to hype themselves up. So Peterson goes on to say there is no such thing as a talk unless it's canned, and it shouldn't be. There is also no audience. There are individuals who need to be included in the conversation. A well-practiced and competent public speaker addresses a single identifiable person, watches that individual nod, shake his head, frown, or look confused, and responds appropriately and directly to those gestures and expressions. Then, after a few phrases, rounding out some idea, he switches to another audience member and does the same thing. In this manner, he infers and reacts to the attitude of the entire group insofar that such a thing exists. DC says, or tell those people to F off. Just me? Latin Patriot says, they usually only care about their own ideas to seem higher in the hierarchy. Yes, Yeah, that's exactly. And we were talking about that a few pages ago, where that's not a conversation. That's not talking. Um, and if you listen very carefully to those people, you can usually figure out a lot of things that they're trying to not say, but say by not saying them. Um, yeah, going back to the whole interview with Jordan Peterson and that Australian woman, him turning it around by saying, "So what you're saying is," and putting her words back at her feet, and her trying to dance around that and all of it. So yeah, Christy says, "I've gotten better at public speaking over the years, but once you hit 30 plus people, it feels like an audience and it's harder." Yes. And then in a lot of ways, you go off sound, when everybody falls silent, when people are chattering back and forth between each other, in a whisper, but it still creates some sort of noise that you can gather from. And then, when you get the whole crowd to laugh, that's a big deal. Or here's one that I experienced: having 300 people gasp at the same time. Then you've done something. So, all right. There are still other conversations that work primarily as a demonstration of wit. They also have a dominance element, but the goal is to be the most entertaining speaker, which is an accomplishment that everyone participating will also enjoy. The purpose of these conversations, as a witty friend of mine once observed, was to say, quote, anything that was either true or funny. As truth and humor are often close allies, that combination worked fine. I think that this might be the intelligent blue-collar workers conversation. I participated in many fine bouts of sarcasm, satire, insult, and generally over-the-top comedic exchanges among people I grew up with in northern Alberta, and later among some Navy SEALs I met in California who were friends of an author I know who writes some horrifying popular fiction. They were all perfectly happy to say anything, no matter how appalling, as long as it was funny. I attended this writer's 40th birthday celebration not too long ago in LA. He had invited one of the aforementioned SEALs. A few months beforehand, however, his wife had been diagnosed with a serious medical condition necessitating brain surgery. He called up his SEAL friend and informed him of the circumstances and indicated that the event might have to be canceled. Quote, you think you guys have a problem, responded his friend. I just bought a non-refundable airline ticket to your party. It's not clear what percentage of the world's population would find that response amusing. I retold the story recently to a group of newer acquaintances, and they were more shocked and appalled than amused. I tried to defend the joke as an indication of the SEAL's respect for the couple's ability to withstand and transcend tragedy, but I wasn't particularly successful. DC Irish says, I'm not much of a talker around people I don't know. That's most people. They don't, we're often very afraid of ridicule, saying the wrong thing, that kind of thing. And so we can clam up around strangers. I know I get shy around strangers, which is weird, since I'm on YouTube. But yeah, if it's in person and with a group of people, especially if they all know each other and I don't know anybody, or I only know one person in the group, yeah, then I become an observer and not a talker. So, Christy asks, have you read How to Win Friends and Influence People? This book seems right in line with that book. Yeah, that's another book that I would love to go through on this channel. I've heard wonderful things about it, but I have never actually read it. So this might be a way for me to do that. Lawrence says, I am the same way, Irish. Survival says, I'm not afraid of ridicule. Yes, and that's what makes you so good to relate to, and people opening up to you and stuff like that is that you're not afraid to appear ridiculous. And that's very humanizing and non-threatening and things like that. So Shaman says gallows humor is often an earned club. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Christy says it's a good read. You'll like it. All right, that I will add that to the list of books that I want to do on this channel. So fortunately, that list is small, so we'll get to it soon. But I want to get back to this gallows humor thing. I was talking to somebody online about COVID in Hawaii, and I was like, well, you could just stick them all on Molokai, and she didn't get it. And I was like, Molokai, it used to be the lepers colony for Hawaii. And she was like, that's not funny to joke about. And I'm like, you got to be able to joke about everything. I mean, everything should be, able to tell a joke about it, no matter how dark it is, because otherwise you're just lost, otherwise you're just in tragedy. And it's traditionally been said that comedy is time or tragedy plus time. And there's a great woman, she did a stand-up routine on her cancer called Live or Live, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Tig Notaro. And it is absolutely hysterical. And it's about this 6-month period in which she has a breakup, her mother dies, and she finds out that she has breast cancer in both breasts. And you wouldn't think that, going through tragedy like that would be hysterical. But it absolutely is. And she has everybody in the place, at one point she says, should I leave? Because everything is so dark and people are like, no. And she's like, oh, you want more tragedy, huh? But the way that she presents it is just so amazing. So if you guys have a chance, go check that out. DC says, I don't like people being rude to other people in public. I always seem to have something to say then. That's you're a defender then. I know a lot of guys who are very good at being the defender and stuff like that. They'll step up in a heartbeat if something, somebody's being hurt or somebody's being picked on, that kind of thing. So Latin Patriot says, some people ain't right though. Yeah. And she says, it's like an invitation. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. So does DC Irish. So, all right. We got just a few more minutes to go. Let me close this out. We're almost to the end of the section. So they didn't find it very funny. And Jordan Peterson wasn't persuasive in saying that it was, a sign of respect that these guys could joke like that. Nonetheless, I believe that he did intend exactly that respect. I think he was terrifyingly witty. His joke was daring, anarchic to the point of recklessness, which is exactly the point where serious funny occurs. My friend and his wife recognized the compliment. They saw that their friend knew that they were tough enough to withstand that level of, well, let's call it competitive humor. It was a test of character, which they passed with flying colors. I found that such conversations occurred less and less frequently as I moved from university to university up the educational and social ladder. Maybe it wasn't a class thing, although I have my suspicions it was. Maybe it's just that I'm older, or that the friends that a person makes later in life after adolescence lack the insane competitive closeness and perverse playfulness of those early tribal bonds. When I went back up north to my hometown for my 50th birthday party, however, my old friends made me laugh so hard I had to duck into a different room several times to catch my breath. Those conversations are the most fun, and I miss them. You have to keep up, or even risk humiliation. But there is nothing more rewarding than topping the last comedian's story, joke, insult, or curse. Only one rule really applies. Do not be boring, although it's also very bad form to actually put somebody down when you are only pretending to put them down. So we have come to the end of the section there. So yeah, it is partially a class thing, but I also think it's people who deal with a lot of tragedy, because I've noticed that other people who have really bad chronic illnesses and stuff like that, we can joke at that gallows level humor because of what we deal with. Like Robin Williams, last stand up that he did when he was talking about all the different things that were going wrong with him health wise. He had this whole, and it was physical comedy too, the way he was bending and arching his back and bending over and stuff like that, and it was absolutely wonderful. But you could tell underneath there was a lot of pain where that humor came from. So it may just be that. It may be that you have to have a certain amount of suffering in your life to do that kind of gallows humor stuff. So DC says, I'm a defender. I never held that title before. Well, you got it now. So congratulations. He says, sweet. And Latin Patriot says, you were also in the military, DC, once a soldier, always a soldier. She says, I ain't gonna lie, I ain't right too. DC says, good point. Yeah, I think it's hardship that creates that kind of humor and the desire for that kind of humor, because you gotta be able to laugh at it, or else it just rips you apart inside, and it's always a miserable sort of thing. But if you can laugh at it, man, that it lightens the load, it lightens your heart. I mean, you can feel your chest rise up, your spirits rise literally when you have that kind of humor going on. So I always love it. I love anybody who can do good, wicked gallows humor like that. I mean, that to me is the best comedy. Who's the other one that does stuff like that? The guy who has the #1 podcast. Oh, I'm blanking on his name. Oh, anyway, you all know him. And if I could remember his name, and he has that kind of humor too, where it's just completely effed up situations, and just dark, but really funny. DC says Carlin was my favorite. Yeah, Carlin's a good one. Although he got some stuff wrong towards the end and really bothered me with some of his humor. It was too mean. Whereas, yeah, I've seen other people do it where it's absolutely hilarious and it's not hurtful to anybody. So Survival says competitive humor. Yes, it's a thing within groups. Yep. And sometimes I can do it. There was one day, my mom tells this story all the time, where I was sitting with a bunch of her friends, so they're all older than me, and they were professionals, doctors, scientists, things like that. And I was just zinging them one after another. They'd do a one-up on me, and then I'd one-up them again. And we had each other in stitches, and it was a wonderful time. Shaman says, yes, especially around people who can get it. Exactly. So, yeah, I know if we all got together, we'd be able to do it with one another. I mean, you guys are that kind of crowd. So, oh yeah, Shaun of the Dead was great. Latin Patriot said Shaun of the Dead was dark humor movie. Yes, I love it. Yeah, dark humor or gallows humor. Yeah, either one works. So, but yeah. Latin says all of the movies related to that one is dark humor. Right. And the British are very good at that kind of stuff. I've noticed. The Irish even better. Somebody said they were these Irish people were drinking English spirits, and one of them said that'll give you a 300-year hangover. Talking about the troubles that Ireland had with England. And so, yeah, they're really good at the gallows humor. So, but anyway, we are at time. We have gone our 2 hours for the evening. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I really appreciate it. I like the new time. So, yeah, we're going to do the same thing Saturday, where we continue with Jordan Peterson's biblical series. And I hope to see you all there. Christy says, "Oh, what's up, Brits?" Yes. Yes. But anyway, I love you all. Thank you all for coming, and we will continue this next week. All right. See you guys. Later, Pam fam. What's the phrase? Mega love shout out. So mega love shout out to all the Pam fam, and be well. I'll see you in a couple of days.